Good afternoon. I think that we can complete the subject of prayer today. But it will mean a very long and probably hard period for you, because it will still remain with you to prove this, to demonstrate it, to manifest it. Knowing it will only be a step, but bringing it through into expression is going to be quite a different matter. And that is going to entail practice, much practice, patience. Prayer, as you know, is our means of contact with God, or bringing God into visible expression, visible manifestation. If we were completely, consciously one with God, prayer would be an entirely different subject than it is now. Because prayer then would be only a communion. It would be only a communion. It would be an experience of love. There would be a continuous feeling going back and forth within us, from the exterior to the interior and the interior to the exterior. In other words, from our inner spiritual self to our outer expression. But this would really be something taking place within ourselves, and going no further than the boundary of our own individual completeness, and it would have no other object than communion, no other object than realization of this oneness. It is only because of the sense of separation that exists within us, a sense of being separated from God, that prayer has a different connotation, a different meaning, and has more the meaning of re-establishing ourselves in a relationship that already exists. In other words, it is it is establishing ourselves in a conscious relationship. The relationship already exists, but we are not conscious of it. And so prayer becomes an establishment of conscious relationship, or conscious oneness, or conscious union. Again, because this sense of separation sets up for us a series of false appearances, prayer becomes a means whereby the false appearances are dissolved and we again see him as he is. We are told that when we see him as he is, we will be satisfied. We will be pleased. when we awaken in His likeness, then the function of prayer in our present experience is really to see Him as He is, to see ourselves, to see conditions, to see the world as it is in spiritual reality. Or the purpose of prayer is to awaken ourselves in His image and likeness, awaken ourselves to behold Him as Christ, to behold ourselves as spiritual sonship. Now, God is spirit and must be worshipped in spirit and in truth. And I give this to you as a starter, that you are not praying when you are speaking or thinking thoughts. No matter how holy you believe your prayers are, if they have in them speech or thought, you are not praying. You may be setting the stage for prayer. You may be going through a preliminary stage leading to prayer. We do that in what we call contemplative meditation, which is a contemplative prayer, when we close our eyes and silently realize God is closer to me than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. Where I am, God is. All that the Father hath is mine. I can never live or move or have my being outside of God. For I am in God and God is in me, for we are one. This is not prayer. This is a contemplative form of prayer or meditation in which we contemplate truth for the purpose of quieting our inner thoughts and fears and doubts. In other words, we are faced with an appearance of the world coming to the end, and we get frightened and we want to get calm. And in order to do that, we close our eyes to the appearance and we realize, God, thou art closer to me than breathing. Thou art closer to me than the end of the world. Thou art and if I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. And if the world does end, and if a bomb blows it up, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. And if I am where thou art, I cannot be separated from life, consciousness, love. So whether it's in this world or the next world, I will fear no evil. And by this time, our inner fears have been stilled, and now we can enter prayer, which is a state of union with God that has neither words nor thoughts, but is merely an opportunity for the free flow of the Spirit of God within us. In the same way, someone comes to us in pain or lack or distress, and we would give them help, and the appearance itself, as it has been presented to us, disturbs us. It is not only disturbing the patient, but they have made it so real that it's now going to disturb us. And so, before we can enter prayer for them, we have to overcome this fear, this doubt, this reaction to appearances. And so we enter a state of contemplation. Judge not after appearances, Joel. Judge not after appearances. The Master has taught you. Judge not after appearances. Judge righteous judgment. What do you believe about God, Joel? Do you really believe God is infinite? Could you believe then that there is infinite good and somebody else or something else? Do you really believe there is some other power besides God, or some other substance or law? No, Joel, you know better. You have been instructed. You have been taught that God is infinite spirit, and that God is the only law unto his universe, and the substance of all form. You know that the body is the temple of the living God. Therefore, be still. Fear not, it is I. There is not I and somebody else. There is not I and something else. Be still. Be not afraid. It is I. I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. I will be with thee to the end of the world, and with everybody else. So be still. Be still and know that I am God. You have nothing to fear. I am God. And I am ever with thee. Whithersoever thou goest, I will go. And if you make your bed in hell, I will be there with you. Be not afraid. It is I. And this contemplative prayer, this contemplative meditation, now brings me to an inner state of peace where I am not reacting to the outward appearance. And now I can say, speak, Lord, thy servant heareth. Now I can rest without words and without thoughts and permit this inner flow to take place. And it is in this stillness, in this quietness, in this confidence, that the appearances of sense are dissolved and the spiritually real comes into expression. Now it is at this point that those who pray must be careful. If you are praying with any idea that you are going to make sick matter into well matter, or a little matter into a lot of matter, you are praying amiss. Here is where the world has gone wrong. It has prayed to a God of spirit to do something to materiality, and a materiality which has no existence. It is like praying to God to change the mirage on the desert. Supposing there is a mirage on the desert, supposing there is a turbulent ocean out there, can you pray to God to still that ocean when you know all of the time it isn't there, it is only an image in your mind? How can God do something to non-existence? Supposing that out on this desert there is a great big wall that won't let you pass, or a whole big city, and you pray to God to open a way for you to go through. Can God answer such nonsensical prayers when there is no wall there, there is no city there? This wall and this city is only a mental image in your thought, and it has no externalized existence, and you are sitting here waiting for God to do something to something that doesn't exist. Do you see that? You might as well sit here and decide you want to cross this mountain and pray first that God opens a path through that horizon. Well, you could sit here forever, because God can't answer that prayer. There's no sky blocking your way. If you can climb a mountain, go and climb. When you get to the top, you'll find that the way is free to go beyond. So it is. If you make the mistake that this world is making, praying to God to do something to an illusory something that has no existence, And that's what it's doing when it prays to heal disease, or when it prays for supply, or for bread, or home, or companionship. It is a waste of time. You must be careful that when you pray, the object of your prayer is to behold God, to behold true being, spiritual being, not to change a condition of matter, not to increase matter or decrease it. Prayer must be for one purpose only on this mystical path, and that is, God, reveal thyself. Let me behold thee as thou art, or thy universe, thy law. Reveal to me thy spiritual law. Reveal to me thy spiritual self. Reveal to me divine being. Reveal to me eternality, immortality, infinity. Only be careful that you're not hitching it up to, and incidentally, move the sky off the mountain, or siphon the water off the desert. Be careful that you are not applying your prayer, because the world is doing that and getting no answer. The world is doing that. It is praying. You have only one object in prayer, and that is to behold God in action. Behold the law of God in action, the life of God in action, the self of God in action, the being of God in action. You have to start with a complete humility. Let's use that word, humility. A state of being in which you say, I do not know what God is. I do not know what spiritual man is. I do not know what spiritual law is. Now, Father, reveal thyself. In that state of humility, in which the Master says, I can of my own self do nothing, or if I speak of myself, I bear witness to a lie, or this message is not mine, his that sent me. That wiping of the self out, the Jesus self, the John self, the Joel self, the Mary self. I do not know how to pray, one disciple says. I do not know how to come in or how to go out or what to pray for. That is really humility. Because actually you don't. What you really want is the experience of God in your life. But humanly you have no way of knowing what that is. And the strange thing is you never will. You never will until you have transcended the knowledge of the human mind. There is no way to grasp the things of God through the human mind. The things of God, spirit, infinity, are foolishness to finite mind. In fact, the finite mind cannot encompass God or spiritual truth. It would be impossible to get even the tiniest grain of spiritual wisdom into the human mentality. The things of God. And so you only come into God's grace when you have come to such a place of inner stillness, quietness, and peace that you are not thinking or trying to outline, or bring through your idea of what harmony is or what good is. Only when you are in that complete stillness. And since no one can stop the action of the human mind, that's why so much of the Oriental meditations fail. That's why they too are not bringing through God in spite of all their meditations. They make too much effort to stop the action of the human mind. If you succeed in doing it, you just leave yourself a blank. You still haven't brought the spiritual faculties into awakened state. But if you use this method of silent, contemplative meditation, we have many, many tapes, many, many classes that include contemplative meditation. And if you practice this contemplative meditation in which you silently, peacefully declare every truth you can about God and your oneness with God and the nature of God's creation and so forth, and then relax in quietness and confidence so that something can come through from the beyond. The only way I can explain it to you is this. Supposing right now you were asked to compose a piece of music, but it must not be any piece of music that has ever been composed before or heard by the ear of man. Therefore, you mustn't let your mind wander around to the field of music. Since you can't get this piece of music out of your mind, out of your memory, it has to come through from an unknown source. And it has to be a combination of notes, remember, that have never been heard before, so you can't even use your imagination to think what it'll be like when it comes through. Now, if you can realize that, and then wait for this piece of music to come through. When it comes through, you'll find out how entirely different music is than what you thought music was. In other words, you'll understand the old wise composers who said that his composition never sounded on the instrument like they did in his mind. He can't recognize them when he hears them. And that's the truth about spiritual truth. There isn't anything that's written down of spiritual truth that once it's written down is anything like it was when it was received in consciousness. And none of us seem to have the ability to write it down. And that's what's so frustrating. We get a most beautiful vision and we write it down and then look at it and that isn't it. And that isn't what came through, and it's frustrating. Now just imagine that you don't know what your demonstration is to be. You don't know the meaning of health. All that you've been taught is that it means a heart that beats so much, or digestive organ that does this, or a limitive organ that does that. And you believe it. But you don't know what health is. You don't know what the health of man is, man who is immortal. You don't know what his being is. You don't know what his body is. Therefore, you have to be like the composer. You want something to come through that never before has been known in the mind of man. And that's the secret of your life, your mind, your being, your body, your health, your supply. Because you can't use your imagination, you must attain an inner stillness and peace, and then wait for the revelation to come through. Now I will show you a few practical examples of how this works. Now you all have gardens, or trees, or pets, cats, dogs, birds. And so, you will have to make your initial experiments with these. No matter how beautiful we think this is, believe me, it isn't a least bit beautiful in comparison to what it really is. If we could see this as it is, we would all be shocked with what we would see. It is so far different than what we are seeing with finite eyes. Now, this is true about your cat or your dog or your bird. You have no idea what they look like, and you have no idea what they act like, because their present actions are not divine. They are the expression of the universal human mind that surrounds them. In other words, your cat or your dog or your bird is just the reflection of the human belief in good and evil. And so they're sometimes good and sometimes evil, and sometimes well and sometimes not well, manifesting the surrounding human consciousness. Now, you can take your cat and your dog and your bird out of that, and you can put them into divine consciousness, where they will never be good or bad, sick or well. They will always be God in expression, and always be their spiritual identity. Now, the way that you do that is you have a period in which you are going to meditate for your dog, cat, bird, or plant, or garden, or tree. You sit down and then you dismiss them from your thought entirely. And now you turn only to God. You have your brief period of contemplative prayer or meditation until you feel yourself becoming still, and then you sit still as if you were waiting to hear the still small voice. And you may hear it, or you may not. You may just eventually get a deep breath within you. Sometimes you breathe so deeply that it touches way down into your stomach, way down into the solar plexus. Or you may just get a feeling of release, as if a weight were taken off your shoulder. A feeling of peace. And that's the end of it. Now, as you do this day after day for just a few minutes, specifically for your pets or your plants, you will begin to notice a change in them. You will notice a change in the relationships of your pets to yourself. There'll be a closer bond, and it'll be of an entirely different nature. It won't be entirely human. You'll see in it that there's something in that relationship of a divine nature. Or you'll see in it a communion with that animal or bird or plant. There's no use trying to describe it. You have to experience it. Now this is what is the mystery. This consciousness that has come through from the somewhere out in the beyond, which is really the depths of your own withinness, this that has escaped up into you is the God consciousness, and it becomes the substance of this relationship and of this body. Let me give it to you in another form. This is easy for you to realize because many of you have had the experience. Let us suppose there is a child, a baby, youngster, and it is feverish. Now you sit down beside it. Don't give it a treatment. Give yourself this contemplative meditation first until you feel an inner peace. And then wait there just for that moment or two until this deep breath takes place, or this inner peace. And then watch how that child settles down into a sleep and then awakens without the fever. And you will find that it is this that has escaped from you that has now become the substance of their consciousness, of their life, of their mind, of their body. You haven't done anything to disease or sickness. You have dissolved material sense and brought to light a state of divine consciousness. Because of our eyesight, it still looks to us as if we just had a healthy body now in front of us. But it isn't so. It's a state of divine health that has come into expression. It is as if this consciousness, which escapes through me, becomes your consciousness and becomes the law unto your being and your body. And so as it escapes from you, it becomes the law unto your animal or plant or patient or student. It's really your consciousness that is now their consciousness, not your human consciousness. In this work, there is no such thing as transference of thought from one individual to another. There is no such thing as the transference of good or evil thought. That is why, if you are faithful in this work, nobody is ever going to be harmed by any erroneous thought that may momentarily or temporarily take place in you. And there is nobody on the human plan who once in a while doesn't have a fear thought or a sensual thought or a doubtful thought or an erroneous thought or a temper thought or temperament thought. There isn't anybody yet has attained purity on earth. And therefore, it is definite that at some time or other we all have a negative or erroneous thought. But this will never transfer itself to our patients or students if we are remembering never to project our thought into their mind. Never project your thought into anyone's mind, either to give them a thought or to receive a thought from them, because you don't want anything they've got. And they surely want nothing that you've got humanly. And so to be sure that there is no transference of thought, be sure that your contact is with spirit alone, with the consciousness within you. And then, as it escapes from you in this deep breath or this release, it in all of its purity becomes the law and the life unto them. You watch it in your plants. Watch how they respond to you. Watch it in your pets, how they respond to you. As long as you have no human thought, as long as you are not addressing them humanly, as long as you're not telling them anything or asking anything of them. When you are completely pure, that doesn't mean that you have to be concerned if some erroneous thought goes through your mind. That isn't going to get outside of your mind. You are directing yourself to the Father within you. You are making way for the imprisoned splendor to escape. That's the Spirit of God in you. And the very moment that you are still, that you take no thought, the bridegroom cometh, the Christ. The Christ, the Spirit of God, comes through into expression. And that is why, and you may have noticed this because many classes have, when we meditate here as a group, if you respond at all and are lifted up, if you feel my meditation, what is it, do you think, that's happened? It is no thought projected out at you. I'm not sending thoughts out here. Sometimes 200 people sitting in the room, 300, 400, 1,000 in February. It is I am staying in here consciously one and wait until that takes place. And when that comes out, that's pure essence, pure God, pure Spirit of God, and it lifts you up. If I be lifted up, draw all men up to that same level of consciousness. Now, in that uplifted consciousness, healings take place. Illumination takes place. Supply takes place. Wonderful things take place to students out here. It would be wonderful if only it could happen to every student in every class, but it doesn't, because it only happens to those who are ready at that particular time. Some students come into our classes for the first time and receive illumination, and some don't even receive it the last time. It has to do with me only to the extent that I'm the instrument through which it happens, and if I'm lifted up, make it possible for you, but only for the you who is at that moment ready. In other words, if it were my human will, then everyone would be lifted up and given their illumination. That would be my human will, but I have no control over that. Therefore, when I do meditate with students, and many times we have witnessed it on the very first meditation they've received their illumination, and others second or third or 12th. Now, all that happens is, it is no act of human will. It is an act of conscious union with God, letting this invisible consciousness come forth, and then it performs its work. And the surprising thing is that one person has spiritual illumination, another person has a fever disappear, another one has a lump disappear, another one has unemployment disappear, somebody else has poverty go out the window. It is the strangest thing, but the answer is that consciousness is the substance of all form. And consciousness is God. And therefore, as we enter this meditation, if we have a plant in front of us and this divine consciousness escapes, that plant begins to express the harmony of God rather than just the harmony of nature. It responds to more than just the fertilization that it got, or the rain that it got, or the sunshine that it got. There's something extra that it received that comes forth through it. And that is why it is possible for those who pray to have far better crops, far better gardens than even those with the best of fertilizers and sunshine and rain. It is possible for those who pray to bring forth more milk from their cows than others do. In other words, we live not by bread alone, not by food alone, not by fertilizer alone, not by rain or sun alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. And therefore, the human body does respond in a measure to foods. You can always tell that in the experience of people who give up most of the foods in ordinary markets and begin to use the foods in health food stores, the pure grain foods and so forth and so on. You can soon see the change in their bodies, the change in their health, because the body does respond to pure food in the same way that a plant will respond to its rightful fertilizer, or its rightful amount of rain, or its rightful amount of sunshine. So does the food, in some measure, respond to, the body respond, and the health, to the right foods. But there are many people who become fadists and believe they're going to find their health or their eternality in pure foods, and they get left. They lose out, because you can only go so far with food. For we do not live by bread alone, we live by every word. But give a person pure foods, the right foods, and to that, the life of prayer, and then you'll begin to see the whole man, the spiritual man. It's more difficult to try to give him prayer and a lot of wrong foods too, unless the prayer helps him to get rid of his wrong foods and turn his appetite in the right direction, which usually happens. So it is then. Don't expect that your prayer is going to eliminate the need for sunshine and rain on your plants. Don't think that your prayer is going to eliminate the need for food for your animals, and good food. Don't be like the man who discovered one day that he forgot to feed his horse, and the horse worked just as hard the next day. So he decided each day he would eliminate a cupful of grain from his horse's food, and the horse seemed to go on just the same, but you know what eventually happened. You can't keep taking a cupful away each day and in the end not have your horse collapse. So it is, man shall not live by bread alone, but let's be sure that while we have the ability to eat and drink properly, that we do it. On the other hand, we have the experience to prove not only that Daniel, when in prison, was fed for, 40 days on nothing but pulse, and whereas all the other prisoners who were fed that way had weakened and become thin and depressed, Daniel was his normal, natural self. It had no occasion to change him. And so we have the experience likewise in the war of many people who were prisoners of the Japanese, who were either ill-fed or not fed, and countless numbers did not survive. And countless numbers came out weak and in bad physical shape, and yet some managed to come out harmoniously. And when you talk to them, you will usually find they were living in prayer in spite of their surroundings. Therefore, we need not feel that we cannot survive long periods even of not eating or incorrect eating. But as long as we're thinking in terms of normal living, let us remember this, that we do not live by bread alone. We live by this conscious activity of consciousness. Now watch it. Watch it with your garden, your trees, your animals. Watch it with every opportunity you have with children, because they're the most receptive and responsive. And you will see that as you attain this release, this deep breath, their fevers will disappear, their little ills will disappear, their sores will quickly heal. And you will see that this consciousness which escaped from you became the substance of their renewal, resurrection, rebirth, then you are not seeking with prayer or God to change something or somebody out here. You are seeking to bring out into expression this released, this inner, that which we call Spirit of God, and then you witness it in manifestation, and it will appear to you as a healed person or an improved animal or plant. Only be sure that you are not trying to connect up this experience with a fever out here or a bad animal out here or something of that nature. Watch out that what you are trying to bring forth is this hidden splendor. Bring it into manifestation and let it appear as spiritual identity. And then it will appear to you, to your eyesight, it will just be a healing. But inwardly you will know that it wasn't a healing at all. You have now seen the spiritual life in expression, spiritual being, spiritual harmony. The only reason that after these healings that people succumb to other ills is that they do not maintain the consciousness in which you have established them. They go back. The Master says, go and sin no more lest the worst thing come upon you. We do bring spiritual healings to people, and they go right back to the very state of material thought or consciousness or living that brought it on in the first place. And all they do is, in clearing out one evil, make room for 7 more to come in. In other words, our life should be devoted not purely to healing ourselves or others, but to bringing forth the divine nature of our being. And that means being renewed by the transforming of the mind, transformed by the renewing of the mind. In other words, it means developing a whole state of consciousness in which we do not put reality, power, law into the world of effect, but realize that all reality, all power, all law is always invisible. You can never see law. You can see an apple formed on a tree as a bud or blossom and then turned into the apple, but you can never see the law that did it. You can only witness the outer expression, but never the law. You can witness, you can sit and watch sometimes as disease is disappearing out of our body and health is being, but you can't see the law that's performing it. Spiritual law is invisible, and spiritual law is the only law. You can't see spiritual life. You can see the body, but you can't see the life of the body. The life is invisible. Life is invisible, law is invisible, being is invisible, I am invisible. You can't see me. I am invisible. And the reason is that I am so big that I wouldn't fit in any room. I wouldn't fit in any arena, because I fill all space. I am infinite. I am one with God. I can't even fit into this year, because I am from everlasting to everlasting. I can't fit into the space of a century, because I am before Abraham was. I am one with God in nature, in being, in life, in eternality, in infinity, in quantity and in quality. Therefore, I cannot be seen. I was before my body was visible, and I will continue to be when my body is no longer visible. And I will be where I am now. I will not go any place. I will not depart, for I did not come. I was always here. Invisible, just as before a few years ago I was unknown and invisible to you, but that didn't mean that I didn't exist. I just did not exist to you, but I existed. And so it was that I existed before my mother knew me. And one man had the vision to say, before God was, I am. Before ever there was a concept of God, before ever there was anybody to have a thought of God, I am. So as you ponder this, you will find that the I that you really are life eternal. And you become the life of your pet, the life of your child, the life of your tree, the life of your body. You become the life of your own body the moment you realize the spiritual nature of your identity. And then, since you can't bring this out through thought, you can only bring it out through silence. You engage in a contemplative meditation until you feel an inner stillness and an inner peace, and then you take the listening attitude, as if, speak, Lord, thy servant heareth, and then wait until that Spirit fills you. And when it fills you, it is removing all of the sins and diseases and deaths and lacks out here. Wherever there is receptivity, there is responsiveness to it. We may not be receptive one day, but we may be receptive tomorrow. We may not be receptive this year, but we'll be receptive next year. None of us is responsible for our receptivity humanly, because it is something that is taking place within us, and you may say often in spite of us. It is like this. I told you the other day, we are not yet living in an age of civilization. Civilization has not yet reached this earth. We are still living in a state of pre-civilization. Mostly men are animals, living by the law of self-preservation. Self-preservation is the first law of nature, says man. And then he proves it by killing everybody else to save his own life, by plundering everybody else to save his own fortune. And that is the universal state of human consciousness. And yet, watch how it is evolving in spite of mankind. Within the human span of a few of us in this room, we have evolved in society to where one group of nations protects another group of smaller nations, something that never before happened, never before this century. We find great corporations protecting their employees, providing hospitals, providing retirement funds, providing all kinds of vacation schemes, something that never happened before this century. We find a greater sense of man's responsibility to man, man's brotherhood to man. But we find it coming into this century, a little here and a little there, a little here and a little there. We do not find it worldwide. We do not find it encompassing even 1/3 of the world. We do not find these things taking place in China, only beginning in Japan, hardly at all in India or Russia or wherever the big populations are. But you find them coming up here and there in the United States, in England, in France, in Switzerland, here and there in the world, so that you can perceive that civilization is dawning. It's coming into human consciousness. You know, there are things taking place in the world today that if they had taken place 30 years ago, this world would be at war. This world would be at war. If these things that are happening on earth today took place 30 years ago, no country would stand for it. They'd shoot their armies across the border immediately. Yet they're holding them in check. Not entirely for fear of the atomic bomb. Not entirely. But partly because there is that in man which is not quite so ready to spring on his neighbor and murder him. In other words, you can perceive the dawning of civilization. Now, there's only a question of time when we will go beyond civilization to spiritual realization, in which myself will be yourself and yourself will be myself, and I will understand why it is that if you do it unto the least of these, my brethren, you are doing it unto me, because I am the least of these. They are me, for we are one. I am in you, and you are in me, and we are in God. And therefore what I do to you, I do unto myself. And if I do good unto you, it is like casting bread on the water, and it's coming back to me. And if I do evil to you, it is casting that kind of bread on the water, and it is coming back to me. Regardless of what temporary loss you suffer from the evil of another, you can be assured of this: it isn't even a marker to what they are going to suffer. Because as ye sow, so shall ye reap. And if you sow to the flesh, you reap corruption. And if you sow to the Spirit, you reap life everlasting. And so if you sow to self-preservation, if you sow to self-gain, if you sow to selfishness, this is the flesh. When you sow to loving your neighbor, you are reaping love or life eternal. That is why all of the Master's teaching was ye. Everything had to do with ye. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. As you do to another, so it will be done unto you. Do unto others as you want them done unto you. Always you. His whole teaching is you. Not God. You. For you can't change God. And you can't bring God into mortality. So it is only as you change yourself into the immortal and spiritual can you come into God. Therefore, when you pray, if you're praying for God to do something to matter, you're out of order. For matter is only a part of the illusion.